Hey, everybody, welcome back to the podcast. It is the Daily. It is Tuesday, and it is April 4th. And
Again.
That's Bill Landis. It's back again. And that's Bill Landis, and I'm Austin Ward. And we apologize for whatever happened with the audio on Monday's version of the Daily. I would never, ever in a million years speak over Bill more than once in a show. Once, yeah, I might do that. But repeatedly, over and over, I know that he's given you all the insight that you want. He's the star of this show. Why on earth would I do that? I'm trying to learn just like you all. I would never do that. I apologize to you, the audience, America, and to you, Bill Landis.
No apology necessary. I think there are probably quite a few people who would like for you to do that more if it means that I don't have to talk as much. But I do like the idea of whatever happened in that video, and likewise apologize for that. I'm not sure how that happened. I like the idea of people just watching it thinking you're constantly screaming over me, which is not the case.
Can you imagine, like, if that had actually been the way it was working when we recorded that on Monday morning? Like, you would have given up after like 5 seconds. And how could I have possibly been reacting to the things that you were saying,
right,
if I didn't let you finish?
Right. That's because I saw that, I was like, wait, what are they talking about? That didn't happen. And then I went back and watched it, and that's what it looks like on some level. I have experience on podcasts where I tend to get talked over. That has not been the case. That has not been the case here on the podcast.
I don't know. I don't like being a villain. I like to cheer for villains. That's my favorite thing, but I don't like to be one, especially not. We don't have that here. We're a team.
That's right. No. Yeah. Maybe we should talk over each other more. No, probably not.
Well, probably in the off season when we get to the boy band conversation, there'll be a lot more. That'll be a lot edgier content.
It sure
will. There will be some of that, but not today. Not on a Tuesday edition of the podcast daily. Ohio State has shifted the practice schedule as they get towards the end. We will not be in the Woody again until tomorrow for a Woody Wednesday version of Snap Judgments after we talk to the tight ends and running backs. So we'll put a pin in that conversation until then. And instead, I have 5 questions at ohiostate.rivals.com here on a Tuesday. But again, that's not really what I want Bill to talk about today. And I didn't tell him. This isn't scripted, which is why I couldn't just give my lines before he was talking as well. What things, Bill, do you still need to see? They're running out of time, Ohio State. And they don't have to accomplish everything by the end of spring camp and by the end of that game in the Horseshoe next Saturday. But what can they accomplish, do you think, in the next week and a half? And what do you think they need to?
That's a good question. I don't know. I feel like sometimes there's like a tremendous sense of urgency in spring that I don't know is all that necessary. So if there are things sort of left unanswered after spring ball, I don't automatically think that's a problem. But you certainly want to see things trending in the right direction if they don't have resolution by the time that spring practice wraps up. I'm kind of on board with Ryan Day's thought that it would perhaps be the best outcome if one of these two quarterbacks, Kyle McCord or Devin Brown, really took that step forward to the point where even if Ryan Day couldn't or wouldn't name a starter by the end of spring practice, in the back of his mind, at least he would have a reasonably good idea of who that is. And I don't know if that's happened just yet, and I don't even know if that's necessarily a bad thing. I just think if you're thinking of ideal outcomes, maybe there would be a little more clarity there than there is at the moment. I think, as I said before, both guys look the part, right? There's not any concern there, but like, oh, they have 2, so they don't have 1. Like that's not what is at play here. But I think in an ideal world, if you're heading into the final 2 weeks of spring practice and the spring game is now less than 2 weeks away, there'd be someone taking the reins perhaps a little bit more than it appears to, at least from my vantage point. But you also might have different perspective on that. Like, do you Do you see it differently? Do you think that, and I'm assuming if you do, it'd be Kyle McCord. Like, do you think that it has happened or is starting to happen?
So I thought that it would happen, and so I'm trying to evaluate any opportunity that we have fairly, so that it's not just confirming what I thought it was going to be, and like, hey, I was right. Kyle McCord is ahead, and he's going to be the starting quarterback. So I've tried not to do that, and I think that Devin Brown has had some periods of practice where he's looked really good, and as you said, it's not hard to envision a world where either one of these guys could be the starting quarterback at Ohio State and get them to the level that they want to be at. I do think, from what I've seen, that, and that's the hard part. Like, what does Ryan Day need to see so that he knows who is clearly ahead or who is taking the reins? Because I am just an amateur observer, and I think that Kyle McCord is obviously going to be the starting quarterback for Ohio State. And it's, if it were me, I think I would make that decision now. I understand why Ryan Day is not, and why they're going to keep rotating throughout camp. Don't have any problem with that approach. I asked him about it on Saturday, and like, because I'm thinking about myself, the temptation would be real. Be like, well, let's get ready. Let's give this guy every number one rep, every good on good rep, and develop for the season, because that's the eventual outcome in my mind. And that's why he's the head coach. That's why he's a quarterback developer. That's why all that, like, he's got a different perspective on that, and his is the only one that matters, and he's really good at it. But as I watch, I think like this is inevitable that Kyle McCord is going to be the starter, and I still don't know that means on the day after the spring game or right after it's over that Ryan Day is going to publicly name him the guy. He probably won't. That's where my bet has been. But I don't know what it would take for him to see that and make that decision and make it publicly. Mm-hmm. Because for me, I feel like at this point through 9 workouts, like that's where this is going. Like I that's what I see. But I am not Ryan Day.
I think it's a reasonable view though, right? And I guess it comes with the caveat that like we don't see every single practice, but in the practices that we have seen, I think it's a fair assessment that Kyle has been at least more consistent, like better, whatever, there's degrees to all that, but more consistent, I think is a fair way to judge it. And then you like add on everything else on top of that. The fact that he's been here longer, has another year in the offense, is like a bigger, stronger, faster guy because he's been in the college developmental program longer. Like all that stuff matters too. Mm-hmm. So it's a perfectly reasonable train of thought. And I like the idea that it's not so much for me. It's not like the building the chemistry thing, because one, like the guys that the quarterback building chemistry with aren't out there right now for the most part anyway. But I do think as you enter the summer, you would prefer to be in a place where you can start building this offense around the guy you think is going to be the starting quarterback. And granted, like Ohio State's offense is not drastically different no matter who the starting quarterback is, but you accentuate different things. You figure out what the strengths are of whoever that guy is and focus on those more, build off of those more. And it's not necessarily to your detriment that if you can't do that in the summer heading into fall camp and throughout fall camp, but it'd be better if you could, I think. And you don't have to force it, right? If there's truly no clear answer, I don't think you force things either just to say, like, we need to start doing this now. There's enough, I don't know, like institutional knowledge of these guys to know what they are. And the offense has been entrenched long enough that they can figure it out on the fly if they needed to. But I do think you could see there's a difference, I think, maybe in the gear the offense has in that first game against Indiana, if you allow yourself that runway to build up to it, or if you're trying to figure things out after you pick a starter in like the 3rd week of camp. Like, I think that's a pretty drastic difference.
I think there's also value towards, Ryan Day's mentioned this a bunch of times, having honest, truthful evaluations and conversations. And it would, if he views it similar to the way that I do right now, which is that Kyle McCord is ahead, he's probably going to win the job, then that wouldn't be a mystery to Devin Brown or, anybody else on the team. So to go into the summer and say, gosh, we have no idea, we hope to have a great, back and forth competitive battle in August, and we're going to keep rotating them through the 1s and 2s throughout training camp. I think that would be and I'm not trying to make more out of this than there should be, but like there can be questions about credibility if the evaluations that the coaching staff is saying publicly don't match up with what everybody else in the locker room sees. And I don't know what that would lead to. Maybe nothing. But if everybody sort of knows what that pecking order is, once you get done with the spring game, you're not going to go through the next all summer of these workouts and throwing sessions and everything else being like, there's no guy, you know, they're both capable. Like once you get to the first practice in August, like you're trying to win a game at that point. I know it's practice number 16, but you know, the emphasis at that point changes and you want to start letting your ones play together and letting your twos, you know, develop behind and building the continuity and putting in a game plan, putting in scheme and all the things that you're talking about to take advantage of what a quarterback does well. So like, I don't think they're going to waste time in that in August. Like maybe Ryan Day doesn't say immediately afterwards what he's going to do, but I think after the midpoint of April, he's going to have to know what that actually is so that the people in the locker room know and that Ohio State can build and prepare for August and then that first game in September. Like I don't think there'd be any reason based on what I've seen to have some sort of summer charade about not knowing who's going to start. Like both can do it. I'm not saying that at all, but I think you're going to have one starter eventually. They're not going to play both of them.
No.
And I think we know who that's probably going to be.
I do wonder if like the I don't know, Youngstown State game was the opener and not the second game of the year, or if the Indiana game was like the third week after two non-conference games, if that calculus is at all different, and maybe you do entertain the idea of starting the season with multiple quarterbacks. I think Ryan Day, as a former quarterback, probably would not entertain that because he understands what that does or can do, I suppose, to the psyche of a player, especially if you're doing it like in a meaningful way, not like the charade that Michigan put on last year when everyone knew where that was going. Like if you actually have an in-season competition to start the year, I don't know if that's best for everyone involved. I don't know, but I kind of feel like I'm sitting on a fence too, because I know I've said in the past, like, if you truly don't know, then don't name don't do it. But if after 15 of these practices, like you start to have a little bit of a lean, I also think maybe you should embrace that. Because I don't even know what could happen if you have even the slightest lean. What can happen over the next 3 months to change anything either way? It almost feels like if you do have that slight lean, you should maybe listen to it and move forward with whatever that lean is. And I agree with you that if there was one right now, it probably would be Kyle McCord.
Yeah, and that the other caveat, as you mentioned, is that we have seen more this spring than in previous years, which informs that, but not everything. And you know, they've been on the practice field where there's been no viewing periods at all throughout camp, and like we might hear suggestions about what happened, but we don't know for sure. We don't go report about it or talk about things that we haven't seen or verified with all those people that are directly involved. So I'm basing that assessment on what I've seen with my own eyes. Ryan Day has seen more, and he has seen it with more knowledge than I will ever have about quarterbacks. Mm-hmm. But if you're asking, like, what do I think can happen by the end of spring? I think it could be more than I thought previously, an acknowledgement of who it is, who the one is going to be.
Guy's still in WrestleMania mode. I'm surprised that you did that too. If after a tough loss for your guy on Sunday night. Spoiler alert in case anyone hasn't watched it yet.
if you haven't seen it yet,
yeah.
Spoiler: it's the same result for the last 1,000 days.
Shocker. Okay, I made sure to mention the quarterbacks so that when you tee me up at the start of a show, I didn't start it again with the offensive line. But now it's time to talk about the offensive line.
Let's do it.
So we won't talk with Ryan Day until next Monday. We have spoken with him after these two scrimmages, but like those aren't tremendous opportunities to gain a whole lot of insight. It's mostly like, hey, this guy wasn't here. What's up with that? And then he'd say like, well, it's not a long-term deal. Okay. So we'll see how that plays out. But like, I want to know, and we're getting asked a lot about this on the board at OhioState.Rivals.com. Like what is for real sort of the I don't want to say panic level because simply naming it that I think induces a panic that I'm not trying to induce, but level of concern, whatever, scale of 1 to 10, where are you with right tackle? Because Zen Mohalski was not at practice the other day. We don't know how long that situation might last. It was sort of like Tegra Shabola and only Tegra Shabola. And we've seen him out there, and he's had some bright spots. He's had some not so bright spots. Perfectly understandable for a guy who's a sophomore, kind of learning a newish position for him at this level. But that's a lot of uncertainty at a pretty important position at the moment, and there's no guarantee, right, that there's going to be an option available to them in the transfer portal. But how hard are they going to look at that, or how hard do they feel like they might need to look at that, even at this point in spring, like halfway through? I don't know. I don't know if they would feel like any better off than they were at the start. Maybe they do, and I'm wrong for saying that. I don't know that I do, just from watching what we've been able to see. So, what's the level of urgency there with making sure that is right, one, but also maybe addressing that via someone who's not currently on the roster?
Yeah, we've talked about this like throughout the process. They've shown a lot of confidence, and that's significant in itself in Zen Mahalski and Tegra Shabola. Like, they think that, they can do it. Hey, we think you can do it. You can take the next step. We don't have to be in the portal. They did talk to guys. They didn't bring any of them in, whether some were good fit, bad fit, NIL, not NIL, whatever. The reason they talked to, a handful of guys in December and January, and it didn't work out. And then you shift. Okay, you're fully invested in the winter workouts and then the spring camp with these two guys in Zen and Tegra. That can bring out a lot in them. And we knew that the challenge would be, hey, make sure that you can, if you show Justin Fry and Ryan Day that they don't have to get anybody in May, that's on you. This is now the opportunity to do so. But the wild card in that is the severity of the injury for Zen Mahalski, which we don't know. Initially, Ohio State didn't expect it to be a long-term thing. But, even if you miss 2 weeks, well, that puts you at the end of spring camp, and that's the end of your opportunities to show reps on the field. Again, I don't know if that's the case. I'm just, for the sake of this argument, did he do enough over 8 practices to say he's definitively a, championship level Big Ten starter, Ohio State caliber starting right tackle? And I don't know what the answer to that would be from Ryan Day or Justin Fry. Probably we'd need to get some truth serum to know for sure. We probably won't know by what they say publicly, but we will know depending on how aggressively they respond in May. Right? Like, I don't think the way that an inconsistency happens in spring practice, and it happens all the time on the offensive line, it would have been hard for me, again, as an amateur observer, to be like, Ohio State can feel comfortable about what they've got at right tackle with a new starting quarterback and trying to take the next step as a rushing team. Like, they were getting destroyed on that side on Saturday. That's just calling it how it was. So, what does that injury, whatever it is, how does that impact it? How much more can Tegra do with, 5 opportunities ahead of him? What do they look like? How big of a jump can you make over that time frame? Like, I really don't know. So that is key. You could have rightfully started this show talking about the offensive line again, because I don't know that there's anything more pressing on this team, because at this point, I don't feel like the quarterback situation is unsettled, or at least a concern for this team, because they've got 2 that can do it. And I don't know if that's the case at right tackle.
I just didn't want to be a meme, I'm trying to keep people on their toes a little bit. But you're right. I think it is the most pressing question with this team. Like, I don't know if I have very many other pressing questions other than, like, generally, are they going to be better on defense? But, like, when you boil it down to specific spots, like, I don't have a lot of, like, oh boy, what's going on here kind of thoughts in my mind, except for at right tackle. And I suppose, like, the fact that they did offer some guys, and I think maybe they brought like 1 or 2 in for visits, but they weren't banging down every door trying to find a right tackle. That in my mind projected a lot of confidence in Zen and Tegra, and that doesn't mean those guys have to be like ready-made products now after 8 spring practices. I think with this position in particular, we don't allow enough time for guys to develop, because even like, as I think I might have said on the last show, like, last spring, I felt some of that with even a guy like Parrish Johnson. It's like, oh, he doesn't look like a first rounder right now in April. Why? and like eventually he became one. So I think there's still plenty of time here for them to bring along Zen and bring along Tegra. But I don't know, that injury to Zen like has me feeling uneasy now. I hope for his sake and Ohio State's sake that it is not a long-term thing. We saw he was at the Blue Jackets game that night, so I guess that helps something. He's able to go out and go to the Blue Jackets game. So hopefully he is back sooner rather than later, even if he doesn't end up playing in the spring game. I'm a little bummed that we don't get to see any practice this week or next week leading up to the spring game to see if perhaps they look at somebody kind of out of the blue at right tackle if for depth purposes than anything else, because it was like Miles Walker was in there with the twos on Saturday, and that's just not a great spot for a true freshman to be in, especially a guy who played high school ball in Massachusetts where he was like playing against guys who looked like me and you out there. Like it just wasn't the highest level of competition. So I don't know. If I was like I was probably at like a 5 or a 6 coming into the spring, like trying just like, what are they going to do at this spot? And now I'm a little closer to a 10. I'm not at a full 10. I'm not, maybe not even at a 9, but I'm like an 8, maybe close to 8.5. Like I think it's not a big deal that position looks a little troublesome at the moment, but I don't know. Justin Fry is a pretty good offensive line coach too, as we said at the close of Monday's show for anyone who could coherently understand it. I think he's the right guy to figure it out. It just makes me a little uneasy. I don't know.
Well, the other part of that, which I guess we've kind of even glossed over, is like you have no control over who's going to be in the transfer portal.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you know, even if we talked about this in the Horseshoe Lounge and during the live show at Roosters on Monday, like even if you put out a bat signal or you acted like Deion Sanders and like, hey, if you're a tackle, you know where to find me. I'm not hard to find. Like that's still no certainty that a player that Ohio State wants would be in there and jump at that opportunity. We could assume that if Ohio State went to that length, they may find some options that they like. But I don't think they're going to do that. I'd be very surprised if they did. And I don't really know what this secondary transfer portal window is going to look like. There was a mad rush of people going in, at the end of the season. And that's going to be the case forever because players want to be able to get to their new spot, enroll for January classes and go through spring ball and get to work with their new team. And I know that this does happen all across the country after spring. We've seen that happen for Ohio State players, and we probably will again at the end of this month when the portal opens again. But like, how many starting caliber players, and by that I don't mean 2 or 3 years down the road, people who could start somewhere else on their current team at right tackle, let's say, how many of them are going to leave after spring camp, and why wouldn't they have done that in January? Like I don't know how many options are realistically going to be available.
I think you're 100% right? Like I think the early transfer window, some percentage of those guys are just like good players looking for a change of scenery or good starters at a lower level who are looking to move up. If those guys hadn't already made that move, like they're not, I just don't think they're going to in May. The May window for me is more like, I'm third on the depth chart here. Let me go see if I can find someplace else that's perhaps not as good as where I am currently that will let me start. That's not what Ohio State's looking for. Like I'm off the top of my head, I'm trying to think that like the number of guys that they have brought in, almost all of them have been in the early window, right? I think Trey Sermon was late, right? He was probably the best example of a guy they've had it late, but everyone else has been earlier, if I'm not mistaken. And at least the impact guys have been. So yeah, there's certainly no guarantee. Far from it. And
did Jonah get through? I didn't think maybe Jonah didn't show up until August. Was that right? Do I have that wrong?
I don't know. I possibly that was like before all this craziness happened, like with the windows and free transfers and all that stuff. Because he was so perhaps because that was the same offseason as Justin Fields, and Justin had to get his waiver still to play. So, and I think Jonah was a graduate transfer, right? So he might have been later, and maybe there's a guy like that out there. It's not impossible. Like I don't think you or I are trying to say like there's no way this can happen if in fact they do decide that's what they need to do. But the chances of you finding that guy in April and January are far greater than they are right now. And it's just not a great position to be in. I still don't know that they're there. I don't think they're going to press a panic button here, but with Zen going down and like you see how quickly that depth thins out at tackle in particular, maybe that forces their hand a little bit.
Yeah, I think that's just a point that I wanted to make. Like, even if they decide that that's something that they should do, it doesn't mean that it's something that they will be able to do. You're not just going to take any warm body at tackle. Like, that's just, even with 85 scholarship spots, they aren't in a position where they can just be like, well, sure, let's roll the dice. And because they're not looking for a backup tackle, like if they decide that's what they have to do, they're looking for somebody who they are confident could start immediately. And I don't, that's the part where it shouldn't be interpreted as, well, spring didn't go the way Ohio State wanted with Zen or Tegra. And again, this is a hypothetical situation, not what's happening now. Like, well, they'll just get somebody in the portal because they can. Like, that's not a certainty by any stretch of the imagination.
No, and they kind of already used their dice roll on Vic Cutler, I think. I don't think you want to be taking multiple dice rolls at one position.
Right. All right. Was there anything on defense? Well, that was a very heavy quarterback and offensive line show.
Just like what we said before, like we're just interested in how the safety pieces kind of fall into place. I think there are potentially like a lot of really good answers there and not very many bad ones. So it's not like a, oh my God, what are they going to do kind of thing. It's just more of that could be interesting. Otherwise, no, I don't know. The defensive tackle depth, maybe, like if they feel the need to address that. Although you asked Ryan Day about that, and it didn't seem like something that he was thinking a ton about. I know that they brought in the kid from Maryland on a visit, and I guess there's not much you could do that would signal you're looking for a tackle otherwise right now, for all the reasons we just said about transfers and offensive linemen. But if they were going to look at another spot, I guess that would be it. But otherwise, from a personnel standpoint, I kind of like what they're doing or what they have on defense. It's a matter of how they choose to utilize it.
What a turn of events.
Yeah.
That suddenly we're like, no, Ohio State's just good on defense. That's it.
I don't know about that. They're better.
Problem solved.
They're better on defense, and I think probably trending in a better direction than people want to give them credit for, based off of some miscues later in the year. But it's not a solved equation just yet, I don't think.
Yeah, like the default position over the last couple of years would be like, yeah, they've got position battles on the offensive line and a new quarterback. Who cares? They're the best offense in the country. There's no problem. Then you'd be like, the defense is like, I don't know, every single spot.
Yeah.
Can they prove it? It's like, we didn't even talk about them today. Like 15 seconds of defense. What a world.
Yeah. I mean, it's, I guess that's the word. I'm not like even overly concerned about the offense. Like my default on the quarterback is like, they'll be good. Whatever. Like, they'll be fine. Their receivers are awesome. They're going to have a million really good running backs. I feel really good about at least half of what they're going to have on the offensive line. So I think they'll be okay, but I don't know. We manufacture a little bit of urgency, I guess. And those are the spots that I'd be looking at.
Yeah. I think Justin Fry needs to come back for another, media update. It's like, we can take votes. Like, you're the position coach that we most need back for an encore.
He definitely
come back out.
He certainly is. I hope we got, I wasn't here for that, but we get the assistant coach day right after spring practice still. That's still part of the off-season routine. So that'll be an important day, I think. Maybe I think last year it didn't happen until like May, so maybe it won't happen until all the roster dust settles, because they still need they're over 85, so like they're going to have movement either way. So maybe we won't have those conversations until all that gets figured out.
I would bet a couple units on that being the case, but we'll see. Could be wrong. I could be wrong about a lot of things. We'll see how it goes. Ohio State winding down the last 2 weeks of spring ball. Spring game is a week and a half away. That looks like a beautiful Saturday in the Horseshoe. Don't worry about that extended forecast. It said there might be a chance of rain. That's just Berm in your head telling you that the worst possible scenario could play out. It's not going to happen. It's going to be gorgeous. We're both going to be up there sweating in the press box with the sun coming straight into our eyes, like we're ants underneath a microscope, or magnifying glass, not a microscope.
You can put ants under a microscope. It's science.
Yeah, I don't think it would burn them though. But anyway, I'm sorry for that. I'll get it better, and I'll try and do better on Wednesday for the podcast daily. That'll be before we go talk to the tight ends and the running backs. And we've got some more coverage coming your way as Ohio State spring camp starts winding down, if you can believe that. That's Bill Landis. I am Austin Ward. Thanks for joining us, and thanks for your patience when we have some audio difficulties. Hopefully there were none today. We'll see you tomorrow.